We're going to do now really is a tribute to our longest serving member here tonight, which is Shirley Black. So Shirley asked me, you know, do I have to come up to the front? And I said, no, we can publicly humiliate you in situ. I am going to ask, actually Shirley is sitting with Lee Van Steltens. Lee has been a member almost as long as Shirley, so I'd like to acknowledge Lee also. And one of our first readers will be Faye Holt, who's also been here almost as long as Shirley. I think Faye, where's Faye? So Faye is actually not going to say anything. Sorry Faye. But at least I did freak her out for a second there. So I'll just give you a little bit of an intro to Shirley, and in fact the first person who's going to really speak is Shirley Matheson. And Shirley's going to talk about how Shirley Black started in the Alexander Centre downstairs. It was really, the group was started by a gentleman called Michael Fay, who I believe now lives in Ontario, and he'd been teaching creative writing at Mount Royal College and was looking for a more intimate environment in which to develop strong ideas about the freeform method. And he started out in Dean House, which is right next door, and which at the time was an artist cooperative. But then the city of Calgary decided to repatriate this building and turn it into a living historic site. So that was 30 years ago, and so he migrated to a small office in the basement, which is probably the small office that we're still in to this day. And he met a number of people there, and one of those was in fact Shirley Black, who was living in the little yellow house she still lives in, just up the road. So I'm going to ask Shirley Matheson now to come and say a few words. And then I'm going to ask Ellen Kelly to come up. Betty Jane Hegarat, who's a very close friend of all of ours, and particularly Shirley, was going to read tonight, but unfortunately she's out of time, so Ellen will read a piece that Betty Jane wrote for the occasion. But first I'm going to ask Shirley Matheson to come up, and she will read some part two.
But it's the biggest tent in the world, I pleaded. I've just got to go. Julia, you know I don't hold with revival meetings. My grandmother looked at the big tent and the newspaper headlines. Homer Grant, world-renowned evangelist. How many people here recognize those opening lines? Written by our Shirley Black in a story called The Biggest Tent in the World. Or these lines. At one time, there was a small town atmosphere in Inglewood. Perhaps being bordered on 3 sides by rivers and 1 side by railroad tracks gave it a sense of isolation. But it was more than that. The sense of isolation was further enhanced by an undeserved bad reputation. Still, those of us who live here loved it. In fact, residents whispered among themselves, "Let's keep Inglewood our secret. Let's not tell anyone how wonderful it is." Recognize those words? Shirley Black in our story, The History of Inglewood. Those foregoing words were all penned by our Shirley, writing of characters both from her vivid imagination and her own history in an area she's known and loved all her life. For Shirley intimately knows the history of Inglewood, Calgary's oldest community settled in 1875. She knows its places, the old homes and shops, the swimming holes, the streets and alleys and rail lines. She knows its people, working folk, non-working folk, artists, musicians, and authors, who every day mingle contentedly with collectors of bottles and bins. This extraordinary intimacy led Shirley to becoming a regular columnist for the Inglewood Community Newsletter, and more recently, author of our story, The History of Inglewood. Her intelligence, her innate kindness, her interest in working with people, and her skill in portraying a variety of plots and places, plus a desire to further the arts in her own home territory, propelled her to help develop a thriving writing community that we know today as the Alexandra Writers Center Society, a community and an organization that has provided the base from which many authors have developed their literary wings. It all started nearly 40 years ago when Shirley spotted an ad in the Inglewood Community Newsletter. Writing lessons at the Alexandra Center, see Michael Fay. Shirley, curious to meet this person who had put out a literary cultural call in Inglewood, joined up. She was hesitant, as most of us are when we come to our first writing class. I had no burning desire to write, she acknowledges. And even after I started, I had no burning desire to publish. It was just something to do, and it was close to home. Michael Fay recalls how Shirley Black took to free fall like a fish to water in that very first session. He recalls, the method quickly unlocked a rush of sweet memories of a childhood spent in Inglewood at the conjunction of the Bow and Elbow Rivers. There was a real sparkle to her writing, a mirror of the twinkle in her eyes and voice. Shirley became a mainstay of the group, helped me understand what the heck I was trying to do, and gave me a sense that I was in the presence of a group of fine writers who, with a bit of support, could also become good teachers. That little group of novice writers grew in both skill and number, and Shirley along with it, artistically as well as organizationally. Soon it became a non-profit society, and Shirley was elected vice president and registrar and readings organizer. Then she took a course on teaching, first instructing classes in pairs for no remuneration, then singly, still as non-paid apprentices. To help pay the rent, they put on garage sales. They advertised their widening choice of courses, and so the organization grew, and Shirley's confidence in teaching and her own writing skills along with it. She stopped teaching for a few years until fate intervened through another person with the name of Fay, her friend Fay Holt, who got her back into it, now at the intermediate level of free fall and short story writing. With her encouragement, Shirley's students soon forged ahead to advanced levels, thus keeping the Alexandra Writers Center courses humming on a rotational basis, with some students segueing to take poetry classes, script writing, marketing, and editing. Shirley's greatest joy was to hear from her former students that their stories, through being developed and polished in her and other classes at the Alexandra Center, had achieved the gold ring of publication. How many people here have taken a course from Shirley Black? How many people have just been a friend of Shirley Black's? Shirley's list of publications, her columns, articles, a history book, and numerous short stories, each so different that one is surprised to learn that they were written by the same person, continue to amaze readers. Through Shirley's description of characters, plots, and places, readers are given personal tours into old world revival evangelist tents, into the dark recesses of mind and matters of mental health institutions, and to the black beauty of viewing star-studded skies on Christmas Eve, but always homing in to the sanctuary of her beloved Inglewood. Tonight, we honor Shirley for her years of dedication to her community, to the Alexandra Writers Center Society, for working through the skinny times to see it develop into a healthy workforce of writers, readers, and dedicated supporters. To each of us who has benefited from Shirley's positive outlook on our own literary endeavors, to a friend, to all who have met her. If I were in Calgary now, says Michael Fay, I would ask everyone to raise their glasses and salute Shirley Black, a lovely woman, a fine writer. and a lifelong friend. Indeed, Shirley has become a friend to everyone who meets her, whether it be fellow Inglewood residents, folks in the downtown business community, writers who have benefited from her encouragement as they develop their own writing skills, and readers who have enjoyed Shirley's gentle sense of humor and vivid descriptions of people and places in her own writing. You are ours, Shirley. We here at the Alexandra Writers Center take possession of you. And tonight, we take this opportunity to thank you over and over again for being who you are, for helping each one of us through encouragement, friendship, and love, to become what we hope we might become someday, an acknowledged and sincerely loved person. Thank you.
Our next speaker, as I mentioned earlier, is Ellen. Ellen Kelly's going to read a piece which Betty Jane wrote for this evening. Ellen Kelly.
Betty Jane regrets not being here and sends her congratulations to the Alexandra Center on this anniversary. She writes, I'm sorry to be missing this party. The AWCS has played such an important role in my writing life. But even more, I'm sorry to be missing this tribute to Shirley Black, because Shirley has been my most valued mentor and dear friend. Shirley is the reason so many of us who came to the Alexandra Writers Center simply to take a class became involved and stayed. And stayed and stayed and stayed. Many others will say the same thing, I'm sure. Ellen Kelly, Davis Neve, Bob Laws, and the late David McGuinness. I've shared stories with every one of them and many others about how a sweet-talking, white-haired woman with a smile that could melt an iceberg got hold of us after that first class and found reasons for us to stick around. Shirley has been the heart of the Alexandra Writers Center since its beginning, and what more perfect heart could a writing organization have than a writer who is able to tap into the deep humanity of any character who flows from her pen. Thank you, Shirley. And I don't think there's anybody who knows Shirley that's in this room that would disagree with that, so thank you, Shirley.